Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tech in Tens. Today's topic for the webinar is demystifying cloud storage, and we're talking about OneDrive versus SharePoint. So, trying to make sure that everybody has a good handle on what the differences are. This is going to be hopefully a 10-minute webinar, Tech in 10, where we're going to provide you some practical advice and thoughts around these two. If you've got any questions, please use the Q&A button that is on the Teams meeting, and we'll look to address any of the questions that might come up. Otherwise, we'll get straight into it. So what we're going to talk about first is what is cloud storage. So we need to understand what it is exactly and why it's so important and why it's being used so much nowadays. So obviously, very flexible. It makes things very accessible between devices and syncing, and it's generally going to be quite cost-effective for making sure that the data is kept secure, it's accessible, and that it can scale. So, unlike traditional local storage, where you'll have a USB drive or a computer or a server. The storage on the cloud allows you to remotely access it anywhere that your system will deem you allowed to be. So they're typically maintained by providers like Microsoft, OneDrive, and SharePoint are examples. There's also ones like Dropbox, Box, Google Drive. There's a plethora of them out there. Accessibility is really important for these tools. Being able to access them from different types of devices, when you're at home, when you're at the office, sometimes you need to be able to access those. So that just enables that, which is great. And scalability is important. So generally with the cloud, you can start off with a very low barrier to entry as far as cost goes, and then you can start to scale it based on your needs. So you can start with Microsoft 365, for instance, with one license that might cost you $8 or $9 a month. But that can then scale up as you just add people, you add storage, and it all accumulates. So very easy to scale. What we're going to talk about now is the differences between using OneDrive and SharePoint and where you might use those. There is also an offline mode that you can do. So we'll touch on that a little bit as well. So where they're similar is that both OneDrive and SharePoint are part of Microsoft 365. Now, there are two Microsoft 365s. There's one that's the live login, which is for personal use, which you would purchase. It might include the Office apps with OneDrive, and that might cost $100 to $150 a year for an account. You can have multiple devices. That's the personal one. On the business side, very different systems, licensed differently, but they both have the integration with the tools like Word and Excel and Teams and whatnot. Both OneDrive and SharePoint are cloud-based, so it allows you to access data wherever you are, and they both prioritize security. So that's really important nowadays of getting access to information, and you can create different rules that you need to fit your security requirements, your privacy requirements, and your just ability to work. And you can mix those together based on what you need to do for regulatory standards and so forth. That's all configurable. Both of them include version control features, which allows you to track document changes, revert previous versions. So no longer you have to go back to IT to go, hey, I've done something with this document. Can you restore it back to this time, this day? So that's really good. And they allow the enable of collaboration in real time. This has been a bit of a game changer for those that work on documents where you've got multiple people where you might access it. You can actually see where the other person is in the document and what they're working on real time. So those keystrokes are saved into the Word document, for instance, as it goes, which also means that if the computer shut down then and there, it should be synced. So you've got some benefit in that sense. So next, we move on to the differences. So the scope of collaboration is a little bit different. So OneDrive is primarily designed for individual users, their personal storage. Now, we're still talking the differences between when you're using Microsoft 365 Business, it's still personal, but it's to the user. So it's not something that you're collaborating with the team for. Whereas SharePoint is, as the name indicates, sharing, geared towards team or organizational collaboration, and it offers a broader platform for creating different ways of working, presenting information, collaborative workspaces, and so forth. As far as access control and organizational structure, OneDrive usually has permissions set on an individual file or folder level. So it's suitable for sharing small repositories of personal information in different scenarios that are very specific. Whereas SharePoint can be more granular, but it also can be broader in the sense that it can set permissions at a library or site level, and it can filter down from there. So if you have a new person starting in your business and you want to add them to a group, they just inherit those accesses. So you know that you don't have to go and customize and make changes. So it's also quite a bit more structured, so it allows better collaboration. Moving on to integration with Teams. So they both integrate with Teams and they allow you to share files. So OneDrive will allow you to share a personal file within the Teams context. SharePoint has a built-in storage area under the file section within Teams and channels to help you organize content. So it's a little bit of a difference between how it integrates with Teams. But as far as team communication goes, OneDrive will primarily focus on file storage and doesn't have some of the communication features that SharePoint does because it's generally for one person. SharePoint incorporates some other features. You can do things like news announcements, discussion boards, and things like that to communicate outwards to the team and whatnot. So this will foster a additional communication and collaboration. So that is really important. Which kind of leads into team sites. So you can customize the team sites. OneDrive has very limited options and it's usually personal based, whereas SharePoint allows you to customize team sites and do different themes and layouts and incorporate different apps. So that's quite handy if you need to configure an area where you need to send people for forms or policies or procedures and things like that. So hopefully that has been valuable and giving you an idea of the differences. It is a bit confusing, especially when OneDrive is the app that will sync both OneDrive and SharePoint data. In this context, we're talking about the infrastructure or the cloud apps themselves, not the one that gets installed on the computer. So what we'll do now is I'll just check the Q&A and see if there's any questions that have come through and see if we can help to answer some of those. So first one is how do OneDrive and SharePoint facilitate collaboration? Well, they both do it simultaneously, as we touched on. It's a tool called co-authoring. So that you can work on the same document, and it will also do version control. It'll track document changes and allow you to sort of revert changes if you need to, so that you don't have to worry about data loss. So that is a really cool part of the change to using those documents. So if in Word, if you're using Word, you've got the auto save button up the top left. If that's turned on, you can do co-authoring, you can do collaboration. If it's not, it's probably not saved in OneDrive or SharePoint. So good one to look out for there. What customization options are available for OneDrive and SharePoint? So very limited on OneDrive side, whereas SharePoint, you can do team sites. There's a number of layouts and themes that come from Microsoft, but there's also third-party apps and companies that will provide or do consulting to help you get the type of workspace that's really going to work with your business. So that is all possible. It does need to be maintained like anything else, though. So you don't want to just do it and leave it. It needs some careful planning and thought. So can files from OneDrive and SharePoint be accessed offline? So yes, that is possible, and that's using the app that I mentioned before. So you can connect your account onto your device, so whether it be a Windows device or a Mac device, and you can do always make available offline. So you can right-click on the folder that you want to make offline, and you can do that that will make it available offline and sync the changes when you come back. Just need to be careful with what you do that with. If you do it with OneDrive, it makes sense because it's your sort of data. You're not going to be collaborating with others without knowing so much. Whereas SharePoint, it could cause conflicts. So just be very careful with that because it will synchronize the changes. What it will do is it'll tell you there's a conflict and it'll give you the opportunity to say, create a copy, don't override it, and maintain it that way. So that is good. Next one we have is, how can OneDrive and SharePoint be accessed from various platforms securely? So if you have a mobile device at all, Windows, Mac, obviously, iPhone, Android, they all have apps for OneDrive. So you can use the OneDrive app to connect on to that. Of course, it's going to depend on the policies of your organization, whether you're allowed to use personal phones to connect to work data, but it will ensure that you've got encryption, you can configure multi-factor, you might have to create a policy where you can force pins to be on so that the data can't be accessed without the person having a pin or a face unlock or something like that. So the OneDrive app is the way to go. You can see the SharePoint libraries that you're assigned in that app. So definitely look at that. So that's good. Do we have any more questions? I don't think so. All right, perfect. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Hopefully that has demystified OneDrive and SharePoint a little bit for everybody. We've got more webinars coming up, so please check the website, so kwame.com.au/tech-in-10. Otherwise, please have a good day. Cheers.